Gotta press the button. Gotta press the button. Press the button. I was just here talking, running my mouth. That's like the second time I did that. Third, fourth, I don't know, fifth. What did I even say? I don't even remember what I said. I was off and running. Mouth don't stop. All right. This is the deal. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Sister Ann is in the house. Good morning. Peace to you, darling. Good morning, Rebecca and Patricia. Yes, we are back in Egypt. Ran into a few things I thought were applicable. Nuclear war, breaking news. My phone was blowing up this morning. Breaking news, breaking news. And I was sitting here laughing like, wait a minute, didn't y'all already break the news? The news is already broken. Did y'all break it again? Is the news breakable multiple times? Did they break the news again? There ain't no breaking news. You already broke the news. It already's lying to us. So I don't know that I'm actually interested in what they were signing. I saw the president and Kim Jong Il Dong Sung somebody. They were signing something. I don't know. I don't know that I care. First of all, nuclear weapons have nothing to do with my life. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But you gotta be scared. You gotta be scared. Kim has nukes. America got nukes too. What if nuclear weapons were a false flag? What if all of this was just made to get you upset, run, yell, scream, whatever? Because it's like I saw something else. Something else popped in front of me. It was Sessions. Sessions didn't let the immigration of a woman who was abused and raped by her husband for 15 years and didn't let her immigrate. And I know that already triggered some of you. You're like, oh my God, he's a monster. And I'm just sitting here and I just think about things a little bit. Did Sessions even know? Or is he just being told what to do, passed a law, it blocked the immigration of thousands of people, and they picked out one woman, broadcast her on the news to make y'all get pissed off because all power and all administrations that have taken over this planet is all about your total hate for a president or your total love for a president and an administration. But then I always like to ask the other question. Is Sessions a monster comparatively to the other monsters? And he's not. He's not. It's not funny. It's just not significant. Like, I think the news is always well, first of all, it's broken, but it's always dramatic. They want to get you emotional. Because when you can get an intellectual emotional, you can make them stupid. I don't want to be stupid. So I know they signed something. I don't know what they signed. I don't even know what the press conference was to release what they said. But this is what I know. Because in times when everybody's lying to you, you got to go on the things that you know. I know that all of the North Korean administrations have been fighting to get one thing. They've been starving the population and putting all the electricity in one area and holding off the whole world, putting off invasions just to do one thing. Make a nuclear weapon. They made it. They put it on a missile. It's over. It's over. They won. The game's done. Like, that's it. But what am I going to listen on? I guarantee you the news release is going to be something like this. Well, America, with their massive powers, sat down South Korea for denuclearization. And North Korea, Kim Jong-il agreed. First of all, Kim can't even make that decision. He doesn't have the authority. If he actually said he was going to denuke, they'd have killed him. All right, they'd have killed him. That's how those administrations are set up. There is no Kim is all powerful, runs everything. He's at the top. But if he walks away from the requirements of the people and all the generals, then they kill him or his family kills him. So they do this. They do this. Oh, well, Trump got in there and he did the opposite Obama and he fixed it. Right. Meanwhile, none of it makes any sense. I really don't even care to watch it. I'm just like, I wouldn't believe it anyway. What's the point of like watching that? And I'm just not going to believe what they say. They're just going to tell me what I want to hear. They're going to say, you don't have to be scared, little black man with the bald head, because Trump, he didn't got them to give up their nuclear weapons. No, they didn't. They're going to keep the nuclear weapons. What they agreed behind, this is probably how the meeting went. All right, I'm not giving up any nuclear weapons, but we can make it look like that. We can make it seem that way, and you get your win because I say I denuked. I get my win because I get power, electricity, trade, and sanctions in. And to me, that's the real story. That to me is logical. That's wisdom. I think we always got to look back Gotta look back for wisdom because I think the modern news is always lying to somebody about something. Anyway, how's everybody doing this morning? So I wasn't even looking at that. I'm in Egypt this morning. I'm looking back and I'm just doing some thought. I'm doing some thinking. Who we got in the house? We got Mary and Ellen, Mark in the house, Sharon and Sandy, and a couple others. Terry came through. All right, so this is what I was looking at this morning. I saw some of the news. We might touch on it a little bit. I didn't think that was all interesting. Look at this. Have y'all ever heard of the starving of Sakura? The starving of Sakura. Let me show you this picture. The starving. They live in Canada right now. They didn't always live in Canada. Hold on. Let me show you. The starving of Sakura. I'm not even saying it right. But, all right. I think that's it right there. I gotta pull up the Wikipedia information and get you some pictures. Where's the picture at? Where's the picture? Where's the picture? Of course, I'm not prepared. Where's the picture? I put the picture. I had a picture somewhere. You know, this is what I'm gonna do. I think I can show you. Can I show you this right here? I can show you this way. This way. Here you go. The starving. Uh-oh. Okay, move it up. There we go. The starving of Sakura. It was a statue that was found in Egypt. And I guess they're assuming it was found in Sakura, but nobody knows how old it is. Nobody knows how old it is. The statue was found, well, it came into the light, I think, into the 1950s. Prior to that, it was owned by some investor somewhere. Right now, it's in Canada at, what university is it at? It is at a university in Canada. They don't know how old it is. They know it's pre-dynastic. They know it's before Egypt. A couple interesting things I found about this statue and looking at it. First of all, it's a couple. It's a very small male, emaciated, and a very small female, emaciated. Very poor, obviously very poor. And they're clutching a baby. There's ancient writing on, I think it's on the buttocks or the back, that nobody knows. Nobody can read. I find this interesting in a couple ways. Let me see if I can get you a better picture of it. I find it interesting mostly because, that's probably the best one they got right there. Move my big head a little bit. I find it interesting because it is a couple that's starving. It's made out of limestone, carved out of limestone. When I look back, I don't see extremely violent, destructive people. When I look back, I see people that were probably a lot smarter than us, people who had to utilize critical thought every single day, all day long. Sakura spelled is Sakqara, if you want to look it up. Interesting that they would invest the amount of time and energy it took to take limestone and carve out two young, emaciated, starving humans and a baby. What message could they possibly be sending to us? What reason? Why would the ancient violent pagans actually make a sculpture of the poor, impoverished people with a baby? Why would they do that? They didn't care. They're pagans, you know. They were like us, right? You know, starve a whole bunch of people in Yemen and not give a damn. Starve a whole bunch of people in Alabama and could care less. Starving people in Africa. Bomb them. When they want to ask for food, want some rice and bread, we send drones, right? So I find it interesting. So it's pre-dynastic. We can't read the language. So it's a tribe, a group that we just know nothing about, right? Probably from the time it was a King Namo, before dynastic Egypt, the first pharaoh was King Namo, and he invaded Egypt. I'll say another way. He colonized Egypt. For those of y'all who still, Britain colonized the world. Okay, stop it. White people colonized the world. And stop it. The colonizer mindset is an old one, right? It's an old one of taking people and forcing them to do things that, taking their land and murdering them. That's not a white people thing, and it's not a European thing. It's not a Britain thing. It is a thing of psychopaths. So King Namo, the psychopath, came up and conquered the lands. But Somehow this was found somewhere and nobody really knows where. I find it interesting though. You look at their heads, see anything interesting about their heads? Is that like your head? You know anybody's got a head that looks like that? Last night we had a little fun doing some alien theory, but the elongated heads, right? Because the ancients, what did they do? They elongated their heads. They were the ones that they found where they took the wood planks to make their heads long and straight. Because magically one day they just woke up and said, you know what? We want our heads to be long and straight. We want to cause some brain damage and, take boards and lock our heads in and brace our children and make their heads squeeze up like a like a cone head, just magically. Not because they saw anybody that looked like that. They found not only mummies, but skulls from across the world on every continent with elongated heads. For some reason, the ancients felt a need to mimic something that they saw that had a very long cone head shape. I find that interesting. I also find it interesting mostly, though, that they invested to make a statue of poor people, that poor people somehow were to be recognized, right? Why would you want to recognize the poor? Why, if they were pagans, did they not give a damn about them? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Is it that they lived through some famine and this was kind of their way of sending forward a message to us? Calamities always come, but they're representing the gods, with their cone heads, or that the poor, what is that scripture said, the poor will be with us always. I was asking my atheist friends this morning, atheist family, because we're all brethren, all of us. I don't care what you think. We all are. We're all brothers and sisters. Is it that you don't believe in the God of the dogmatic religions, man-made, and what they say God is? Or is it that you don't believe that there's anything else off of this earth? Like, that's what I wonder, because I don't think the word atheist really exists. I don't know the word religion exists, because everybody believes something different. So I'm just curious about that. I'm curious. When we look back, I always like to look back because I see wisdom. I see people that have a little more endearing hearts. I wonder, are there any nations in power today that would carve statues of the poor in Yemen that they're murdering? Are there? Are there any statues being carved by the kings and the lords of the governments today of the people of their own populations that they're starving? I thought it was a beautiful statue. Here's the writing that's on the back. There's a picture of there. You can't really see the writing all that well. But it's in Canada. I think that back when we were hunter-gatherers, we were more collective and we collaborated more. They were smarter than us. They realized that they had to work together. Is it possible that this is some sort of a message too into caring for the poor? Not necessarily from you don't just make statues because you want to give reverence to something, but perhaps because there's the writing right there. But perhaps because I can make it a little bigger. Because they knew there would be times coming, revelation end times, perhaps, I don't know, where we wouldn't work together, where we would be played against each other. Sometimes I wonder, have we, before King Namo, the colonizer, before Britain invaded, and by the way, King Namo came from the South, by the way, just in case you wanted to know, Egypt. Get to know your history. King Namo did not come from the north. He didn't come from Europe. He came from the south, which means he had a lot more solar energy on his skin, which means he was a lot darker than the people he was invading. So let's be honest about those things. Do we have brains that evolve beyond having groups bigger than tribes? Or have we evolved socially to a place where we can have nations or even states Do we have the ability to have enough love and empathy for those that we rule? I always question the nations. I always question the colonies and the borders because to me, it's just it's a big rig of the system, right? It's a way of getting a lot of people controlled by a very powerful few. So I'm not interested in the nuclear proliferation deals. I don't know that they're real. I don't know that I care. I know that there's always powerful people who stay in power because they always keep us scared. They always have something new. There's always breaking news. And we believe the news as opposed to the news is broken. And we don't know what parts of it are actually true. So I'm not interested in all of that. I am interested, though, in how peaceful the tribes were back then. You know, when you had chiefs as opposed to prime ministers and presidents, you didn't have the ability to wage earth level wars. You didn't have the ability to kill in the hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands. I think that we need to be back at a time of chiefs. Like, I believe in the republic, if you will. I believe that when you have lots of small republics, you have a lot more peace. But when you have lots of large, massive nations with 500 people ruling 500 million, 5,000 people ruling 250 million, the world is broken. Our brains haven't evolved that far yet to do that. I think that we have to look back. I think we have to look back to wisdom. Someone posted something. Who was it posted? Brother, who posted that this morning? It was, turn that off. I think it was Mike that shared it out. It said, a wise man can always be found alone. Let me see if I can share this to you. It was a wolf. I love the wolves. Always nature. Nature has great examples for what we are, who we are, what we should be, what we shouldn't be. I don't think we're evolved enough to have the tools and the toys that we do. There was an interesting piece of news this morning from about kids and video games. I'll show you. Here it goes right here. So, a wise man or woman can always be found alone. A weak man can always be found in a crowd. I find that to be true. I find it to be true that in a time where you always have these big, massive rulers, kings, lords, governments, always telling lies, that the strongest among you will always be the ones who walk by themselves. I think lies attract the crowd. When you have media and kings and reports of the kings that are lies, people will gravitate towards popular, and what's popular tends to be what comes through Hollywood and the media and the king's news releases. I think a lot of that wisdom is probably based in not being led astray by report after report. So I look at the news, but I'm always questioning and not really paying attention to it. I don't know that any of us are wise, but when popularity disagrees with you, you're probably heading in that direction. If you're seeking to be popular, you're heading in the wrong way, because what's popular can't be true right now. I don't know, back then it could have been. Right now it can't be. I think that our ancients were right. I think they were wise. I think our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, I think they knew a lot more things than we did, because they handed these things down for generation after generation after generation and after generation. And they always taught us that the rulers were liars. They always taught us not to trust them, you know, and we end up trusting them. You know, it takes a lot of murder to uphold an empire. I think Rebecca just said lies of the empire. The empire has to lie, because how do you get 240 million people to agree with killing every day? You know, they're sentient. I think they're sentient. I would think out of that 240 million, a lot of them got to be somewhat sentient. Not all of them. I know a couple. They need to all need to go back, get a club or something, live in a cave. But we're slowly heading in that direction in terms of becoming sentient. But an empire has to murder a lot of people to keep it up. An empire has to pay a lot of soldiers to do a lot of fighting to keep it going and keep it growing. An empire only exists by growth. It doesn't exist in stagnation, you know, and that's what we were talking about yesterday in terms of being debt slaves. We are all slaves to debt. We can't walk away from our employment for the lords and the kings. Well, we can distance ourselves. We can't totally walk away from it, but we have to change how we think to even get there. But an empire has to murder a lot of people to keep it going. Good morning, brother Chris. Um, see what y'all are talking about. Metalworks, melting stones causes these heads the same as nuclear contamination, which can make sense too, brother Mark. It could make sense that their heads are misshaped, not because they saw some aliens in the past they turned into the religions, but because, you know, some sort of genetic alteration or modification from smelting metals. I think anything's possible. I think we don't know anything. All we know is we don't know anything. So what's the point in fighting? What's the point? What is the point? Like what do I get out of sparring? I always end up back. I don't know why we keep having fun with the whole religion thing, but what is the point of sparring over things that none of us know? None of us could possibly know. Good morning, Plemmy K from Australia. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. But wisdom. Let me show you this. So there now is an effort to come after video games. I don't know if your kids play video games, but there's now rehab. there's discussions around mental illness and what we're doing to our kids by not letting them go outside, but then playing hours and hours and hours of video games per day. Let me show you so I can pull this up here real quick. I think there are a lot of wise things we did in the past. You know, we used to be outside. Our kids were raised in the fields. They were raised in the wilderness schools. They were taught survival and critical thought, things that don't exist today in our population, or they don't have to be as prolific as they used to.
Has been placed in rehab for her addiction to online gaming. Her parents say she was playing for 10 hours a day without taking a break. For the uninitiated like myself, the game in question is called Fortnite Battle Royale and is an online multiplayer survival game. 100 players are dropped on a virtual island, but only one can make it off. It's become incredibly popular, over 40 million downloads since it was launched last July, but the parents of the 9-year-old are calling for it to be banned.
We had no idea when we let her play the game of this addictive nature or the impact it could have on her mental health. This is a serious issue which is destroying our little girl's life, and someone needs to step in to ban it before it becomes an epidemic.
Are video games indoctrination? I think Clemencia just said that. Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. Everything, you know what? I think everything is an indoctrination today. But let me clarify my stance before we go too far and finish the rest of it. But I don't seek to figure out whether or not we should be banning video games or stopping companies from making them. I believe in freedom and I believe in self-determination. And video games, they're not destroying this little girl's life. The parents are destroying the little girl's life. It is the parents who've thrown out the wisdom from the past in sending the girl outside to play in the sun, plant some seeds, do some natural things, as opposed to sitting in the house on a video game all day. So no, I don't blame the game makers, whoever's behind it, the CIA trying to walk kids into this normalization that murder's a good idea. But this is a game called Fortnite, and apparently they drop you on an island Only one can make it out. So what does that do to the mind of a child? Well, I think that as a parent, you got to look at the games that your kids play, first of all, because the subconscious, it doesn't make any delineation that I understand between reality and fantasy. So the movies they watch, the games they play, to their subconscious is real. So the only game that I really banned from my kids when they were growing up was one called Grand Theft Auto. The reason I banned that because that was a real life situation that could occur. I don't want their subconscious to be programmed to rob, steal, or do crime. I don't want their minds to be programmed to normalize decision making in an urban environment where these things happen. So they could never play that. But I let them play the other games, the alien shoot up games and all that stuff, because that's not necessarily real. And I don't know that their brain would attach to that. But even still limiting that. So absolutely, the video games are a form of indoctrination. Probably one of the most significant damaging ones because of the amount of times kids play and what it does to their decision making. And so while indoctrination is, most of it is slowly over a long period of time, video games is significant a lot. It's sound, it's sight, it's everything in a very short period of time, but it changes how they make decisions. So let's kind of finish this up. So I don't want to make anyone think that, oh, well, we're going to ban video games. No, I'm not for any of that. I will never be. I am against the next law that you're about to write now. Okay, I'm against every law. Every law is the opposite of freedom. Like Bob Marley said, I agree with, which is every law is illegal. Every last one of them. Every government is illegal. Every last one of them. So I have no interest in telling anybody what to do. But we as parents and adults, and those of you who are young who are thinking about doing, or you've got nieces or nephews, it's important that we understand how these video games change how we think so we can parent better, wiser from how we used to.
We are awaiting a response from the developer behind Fortnite to get back to us. Meanwhile, we got the opinions of a former hacker and a psychologist on it.
Son is 14 and Josh actually plays this Fortnite game, and I see him play it a lot. The great thing about it is I see him interacting with kids all over the world.
There are lots of ways to communicate with people around the world other than video games, and our children are losing a little bit of a sight as to what's real and what's maybe virtual.
I think video games are part of our culture now. The story that broke recently of a 9-year-old that has had to have care because of being on Fortnite, I mean, I blame the parents, I don't blame the children, but computer games aren't bad.
I just don't see the use of them. I don't see how they're productive. There is such a tendency to spend so much time on the computer. Recent studies show that the more time they spend in front of a computer or on their phones, the more likely they are to have depression and other mental disorders. There's been
studies by the University of California, for example, in 2015, where computer games are actually being found to actually increase memory, especially in 3D games.
There are many ways to increase memory, certainly pen to paper, pencil to paper, all sorts of memory games that you can play with a book.
I think games also can teach. It's like watching a movie. They can be good and bad.
All right, so they go back and forth, and I'll post it. You can watch the whole thing, but they go back and forth, and it's a great discussion. It's a great discussion to have. Interesting one. Because this is the world that we're going into. This is the time that we're coming into. So something he said that triggers and keys me in that I like. He said that, but these video games are connecting our kids to other kids from around the world. That's huge. That is huge. That is phenomenal, right? We talk about becoming a collective. How do we become a collective? We have to be exposed to people from all over the world. We want to make sure we expose our children to kids in Saudi Arabia, and kids in Africa, and kids in Canada, and kids in Australia, and kids in America, and back and forth, kids in the UK. Because when kids have friends all over the world, they're less apt to be adults who are okay with murdering their friends from all over the world. Right? From a peace perspective, becoming a collective, that's important. However, I'm not sure that we're linking them together in a friendly way. If you really think about it, they're linking together to play out these narratives of survival, which is what we have today, to play out these narratives of war, which is what we have today. Why can't they link together and drive Mario Karts? Why can't they link together and do fun things? Why is it that all of the really good fun games are violent? I'm not an anti-video game person. I grew up on video games. But they were a different type of video game. We had the flight simulators. Most of them initially, they didn't have bombs. They didn't have, Gatling guns, and you didn't shoot people. They taught you how to fly. We had video games that were just fun. We had video games that taught. We had some real violent ones too that didn't seem like they were violent. We had Monopoly, which is an extremely violent game. This gets back to blaming the tool as opposed to how it's used and why it's used the way it's used, right? Blaming the gun, blaming the religion, not blaming the psychopaths behind the use of these things. I don't think video games are bad. I think video games are good. I think the problem is once again, we don't control how all of this goes. We have video game makers that are out to make a lot of money, and violence, sex, and whatever else sells, and learning, education, teaching kids to work together as a collective and build a sim city, that doesn't sell as well. Why is that? Why is it that violence is so popular and positive things that actually can help the human race and take us into a better time aren't? Why is it that cannabis is illegal? It expands your mind. It makes you think. It turns you into somebody. It connects pathways that weren't connected before. But alcohol is fully legal. It makes you dumb, makes you crazy. You do violent things. Because we don't actually control the people who make all these decisions. We don't control the laws. We don't control the profit structures. Right? You're not going to stop video game makers from making violent video games. They want to survive. They want the house. They want the car. They want what everybody else has. And the only way they get that is by producing what's popular. Like we talked about, the lone wolf walks alone. The wise always tends to walk around alone. I don't think that there's a very profitable future in being wise. I don't think that you'll be very popular with your kids if you ban certain games. But it's an interesting thing to really think about. The video games you let your kids play and how often they play it. Mine play to Minecraft and games like that. But I have a son who actually taught himself how to program playing video games, right? Building worlds, so it landed him an internship, right? When he was he 14 when that happened? So everything is about the methodology and the philosophy that we utilize these tools for. It's not a tool that's dangerous. And so the idea that you want the game maker to stop, I don't think that's important. I don't think that rolling out a law to ban it, I think that's stupid. I think that you let people see the damage that gets done by letting your kids abuse these things and the wrong things, and you teach adults to raise their children in a different method. That's how you fix things. Rolling out a nanny state doesn't fix anything. You just put a bunch of band-aids on things. People, can't. Then you create a black market of underground video games. Don't we have enough black markets? Like, this is dumb, and that might be racist, But we need to educate people and grow as a collective, not force others to do this, that, or the other. And so they made a lot of interesting points. They can help with memory. They can help with learning. But the reality, too, though, is that we are old, most of us. This is the world that they're going to live in. It's not a world we're going to live in, And so their minds are going to have to be attuned to utilizing these devices because that's just the future. But it also is our job as the older, supposedly wise people to pull the reins back and not let society and profit dictate everything that our kids become. Sandra says she was never interested in video games. Video games started, Sandra, for the most part, when I was a kid, but they were block video games. games. We'd play them for what, 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning. Then we're like, okay, that's enough. This is boring. We'd go outside and play. The video games are different now. Back then, they weren't as exciting, right? We had ping pong. Now they have complete virtual reality games. Like, think about this. You ever think about a lot of communities you drive through? When we were kids, you see bikes outside. You see skateboards outside. You would see toys in the front yard. You would see all of that. You don't really see that anymore. You could drive through a community and you knew kids lived there because there was kid activity. There was evidence that kids play at that house or in that yard. Now yards are manicured. They're full of chemicals and pesticides and herbicides and sod, not really grass. And you don't even know the kids are there because kids aren't even outside anymore. They're inside, being indoctrinated, being trained. But for what? For a peaceful future as a collective, or for war? Like, you can be as hippie as you want. You can teach your kids love and working together and collective all you want. If you're not teaching them 6 hours a day and the video game is running 6 hours a day and it's teaching them violence, pick up a new gun, find a clip, shoot fire, somebody else is going to die, but it's okay. It's better that they die because I need to get off the island, not them. Compete as opposed to collective. Your teaching is going to be overridden by the game. You know, so highly important we pay attention to the movies our kids are watching and definitely the video games that we're playing. Grand Theft Auto is really bad for non-PC and non-safe behavior. Yes, Jeannie, it is, which is why it wasn't allowed in my house. I drew my limits. When I saw certain games, that was it. And as they got older, I got a little more lenient, you know. But we have to be careful of the world where the word isn't sellout. It's not a right word. It's just that, what point is it if we're evolving, but we're letting video games and TV de-evolve our kids? All right, let me see a couple comments. I'm always asking about the games they play. Nosy mom here. I even know the friends they play with. They say hi to me, and that's important, Gene. It's important to be a nosy parent. I'm a nosy parent too. I was a very nosy. My kids, they didn't even get to go sleep at people's houses unless I knew whose house they were going to. Do I know Johnny? Do I know Johnny's mama? Do I know Johnny's father? What are they up to? As they got older, I became a little lenient, but you want to be involved in your kid's life. And I always ask them those questions. You know, I didn't just let them go anywhere because you don't know whose house they're going into, what that family does, what they talk about, what kind of indoctrination and teaching your kids are going to get from them. I think that you have to be careful of certainly the influence and friends that they have. But as kids, we used to journey different neighborhoods, meet different kids. We used to socialize. Like, I think it's important to socialize online. I think it's important for kids to be exposed to kids all over the world so they just know that like, think about something like this. Think about, like, you know, racism and nationalism and the positive, well-meaning types. I don't think any are really actually well-meaning if you really think about it. And then the heinous types. Kids, if they know, and they're playing video games with kids, say in Palestine, say kids in the West Bank, and they realize that, you know what, my friend over there, say Johnny, probably not Johnny, but Johnny is a good guy. I like Johnny. I like to play with Johnny. Johnny, we're friends, mommy. Why can we only play for 4 hours a day, mommy? Why do they only have electricity for 4 hours a day? Why can he only play for 2 hours a day because he's charging back? Like, why would anyone do that to Johnny? Johnny's just like me. He says funny jokes. He sends me memes. We have fun. We talk online. We play games together. Like, I think exposing kids to other kids around the world is very important. You know, it's the same socialization we got as kids to a degree, where we would go out and we'd meet kids in different neighborhoods. We would journey to different places and new towns on our bikes. We'd meet different kids, and, you know, someone, you know, would say something racist. Well, you know, Asian kids are this. And you're like, wait a minute. I mean, Asian kids are this. I just went down the street. Dwight, that's my friend. Yeah, sure, he's good at math. Dwight was good at math. Actually, it was a real Dwight. He's real good at math. And he's a good guy. We jumped on our dirt bikes, and so mommy, the idea that Asian people are this, like, that's really racist, mom. The kid, of course, the kid won't say that, but it's important that the kids socialize. I think they got to socialize locally. You got to get them out the house and socialize in person, but also socialize online. But how we utilize these things, I think, are the problem. They're being utilized for like war and violence and fighting together against something, as opposed to learning or collectively building something or doing something. Just a mind drug. Make a game. Just a mind drug to me. Make a game as we did in the 80s. That's interesting, Mark. A mind drug, right? A mind drug that could require rehab. A mind drug that's addictive. What's addictive sells, not what's important for the future of humanity or their future. What's addictive sells, and so they're going to make what's addictive because we live in a crony capitalist world. I said. We don't live in a crony capitalist nation. We live in a crony capitalism world. The entire world is under the boot of capitalists. Now, you might live in a socialist country. You might live in a communist country. You put whatever name on it you want. It doesn't matter. Capitalists run your nation. Banks control mostly everything. And the ones who don't, they're the countries that have nukes, and they got their own little capitalist bank where they're doing their thing, which is like the main spit against socialism and communism, is that you never really had those either. You had the same screwed up systems as capitalism. Now, there were things that were better, things that were worse, but right now, whatever makes profit is what sells. What's addictive is what sells. Speaking of addiction, what about adults' addiction to the hype TV producers? Yes, devil's advocate. Well, you know what? It's the same thing. It's the same thing, I think, Jeannie. I think that the hype on television determines the hype in the video games, right? The indoctrination that's built up in normalizing violence and war and the video games and television, it's the same thing. Kids are interested in what their parents are interested in. Kids are interested in what comes over the television. That's the danger of having the military-industrial complex run Hollywood. Who are we as adults? That so easily fall upon alcohol and pills to talk of addiction. Yeah, well, we are an addiction society. We're an addiction society. Maybe that's another reason why cannabis is illegal, is because it's not addictive, not chemically, but alcohol is. We're played against ourselves, and I don't think we think through a lot of these things. Bob Marley was talking about a lot of that, where, one expands the mind and the other is just, it ends up being a violent, has a violent use. You get drunk and you beat up your wife. You get high and you get hungry. You get high and start wondering, should we be playing video games? Should we be playing violent video games? You start getting deep. It might just not be making any sense. But when we look back, we didn't have these things, and now we do have these things. And I think we have to think about how we use these tools. Indeed, I worry about adrenaline rushes over and over. Also, with respect, subject WS with respect, I assume, subjected to the sound waves blasting from all those surround sound systems are awful. The gunfire. I made a move. Yeah, Brenda, well, there's a lot of interfaces, right, that are problematic. It's also their eyes, right? They're staring at these screens that are unnatural light. They cause problems with their vision. The adrenaline rushes are similar. But, it's interesting. The adrenaline rush that they get in the video game is more natural than the adrenaline rush adults get at work. When adults have that consistent, constant stress throughout the workday, it's damaging to their system. It's damaging to their immune system. It shuts it down. The adrenaline rush kids get in video game, though, while it might be more natural because it's for spurts and then it goes away, it's not like the grizzly bear chased you and then you got that adrenaline release and it stopped for days before it happened again. But it happens every 5 minutes, right? The game's got to be exciting every 10 minutes. What does it do to a child from an epigenetic perspective? What genes perhaps, are we actually flipping genes and making kids, ooh, are we actually flipping genes, warrior genes in children because the games are so engagingly, addictively violent? Are we actually not just giving them learned responses, but actually flipping genes and making psychopaths out of them because the video games are so good? Ew, that's a scary thought. That's a scary thought because it's the same train the military does. And this gets back to the flight simulators from the 80s and why they say the Air Force released them, because they were trying to get people prepared for joining the Air Force and doing these things. How people talk about now they're trying to prepare kids for flying drones and things like that. It actually makes scary sense that the training the police and the military get were perhaps giving to children. Now, I don't think they knew that they were flipping warrior genes to make the kids aggressive, but the soldiers aggressive and the police aggressive. But we're definitely making the kids aggressive. And it's a little sicker than that, too, because not only are we perhaps flipping warrior genes in them, turning up aggression, turning down empathy, turning down love, and getting used to seeing blood splatter on the screen, but we're also desocializing them. Right? So it's a double whammy. They're also not getting the socialization in normal life. They're not knowing that feeling when the goldfish dies or your friend gets really sick or your friend goes to the hospital. And so they're losing that connection with life, right? With other human beings, other little kids that we used to get all day long, every day. D said, we believe whatever we are shown on TV and in the movies, which is a scary thing too. We believe it because our subconscious, it just gets written in. The subconscious, right? We're just being programmed. So we certainly have to be really careful from a kid perspective, but then also an adult perspective, which is why, like I said, I don't watch American news. I don't watch any American news stations. The state is always trying to indoctrinate me and train my brain to think the way they want me to. You know, that, little subliminal things, showing the flag, playing little Bruce Springsteen in the background, you know, making me drumming up my nationalism or drumming up my, you know, if I'm a Democrat isms, or drumming up my Republic isms, or drumming up my need to defend my president when somebody says something, or drumming up my need to attack the president because he says something. Like they're constantly programming. There's always images and cartoons and things, or images being flashed and commercials and things that are constantly programming us. So I don't watch it. I watch news from other countries because they get screwed up with the programming. And I get programming from Al Jazeera in the UK and China. And it's just like, oh, damn it, he's all over the place. You're not. But I don't want to be programmed to fall in line with how my nation wants me to think. Pong and Breakout started it all. Yes, and I remember those were great video games, but we always still went outside and played with other kids. And we'd always meet other kids. Like we'd be out riding on our bikes and we'd see a bike in front of somebody else's house. Like, oh, what bike is that? It's a BMX? Whose bike is that? You know, we know that, okay, there must be a kid here who's staying with his grandparents or staying with his uncle or aunt for the summer or something like that. And so we had a new friend. We go knock on the door. You know, whose bike is that? Can that person come out and play? You know, and we did that as kids. And, you know, and you never knew who the kid was, where they were from, what state, what, you know, and it helped you to be well-rounded, right? Like something I really don't understand. I don't understand. Why do you let your kids only play with kids who look like them? Like, how crazy is it? If you have a child that's Irish and you only let it play with the Irish kids, you have a child that's African American, you only let it play with African American kids. You don't get them out. You don't expose them to other kids. Like you're making a little silo-minded child. You're giving them your because you prefer to be with this type of person. You're now making a clone of you to be just as ignorant as you are. I don't understand that. Like, even if my parents were racist, and they're not, they weren't, I don't think they were. I'm sure they had their own little indoctrination, but I really didn't care what they thought. Like, not when it came to my friends. I played with my friends. I had a little poor little white kid up the street I talked about before. I used to play with him all the damn time. My parents, they didn't want me to, not because he was white or poor, but because apparently, yeah, he was getting into things he wasn't supposed to, but I played with him anyway. I didn't care. He was a nice guy. And the funny thing is, even that formed a lot of my opinions later on in life. Like, I understand that poor whites got it just as hard as poor blacks, as hard as poor Hispanics, as hard as poor anybody. You know, which is why I don't fall in line with a lot of their little teachings about privilege and whatever. Some kids are privileged by birth and others aren't. Some kids are privileged because they have parents that raised them to not play video games, violent ones all the time, and not get the warrior genes invoked, and others that didn't have parent privileges and didn't. So I don't, again, skin means nothing, but why would you lock your kids into having the same problem as you do? It's like even with diet, it's the same thing. They talk about a lot of the diseases passed down. They're not actually genetic. They're trained because you eat ho-hos and get 2 liters of soda every week and honey buns and ramen noodles. And because you eat these things, you teach your kids to eat these things. You actually train your kids to want the nutrition, the very minimum nutrition that comes from ramen noodles outside of the wax. And so they grow up, they eat what you ate, you know, but odds are you probably ate a little healthier because the food was a little healthier when you were young. So your organs formed appropriately. Your child ends up having the diseases you have when they're young because they're eating the crap that you're eating now. And so now you got kids with diabetes and cardiovascular diseases, and it's not genetic. A lot of it, it's just behavioral. We plague them with the plagues that we suffer from. Extremely unwise. We don't look back. We don't look back at the natural things we ate and the natural things we did. It's important for kids to go outside. It's important for kids to get in the dirt. Let me keep going down. Moderation in all things. Amen. That's everything. Brother Michael, welcome to the house. I had to go to the arcade and play video games. Jeannie, that's another interesting one. We used to go to the arcades. I guess they don't have those anymore. Not many of them. We go to the arcades and it taught you to socialize. You had video games, which were fun, and they were, I guess, somewhat violent, but they weren't real. Like you had Dig Dug and King Kong and, you know, Galactica, and you had things that weren't real world events, but you had to sit there and talk to the kid and meet some kid playing. Oh, you're playing good. What's your name? My name, Bobby. Oh, you Bobby? Okay. Bobby, my name, Gerard. Okay, you play good. Okay, look out. I've been to this level. Do this, do that. And you had this socialization thing happening. You had energy and exposure and, you know, kids working together. And then you made a new friend. Now you're walking around the arcades. We used to do a lot of that. We don't do that anymore. And we need to figure out ways to do that. I think we got to have more play dates with kids that are from different religions, different ethnicities, different countries if possible. You know, like, it's okay. Like, I think people, they don't want to do that because they're fearful of the awkward moment. Like, oh, well, we're going to go and hang out with Bobby and Tim because we get along. Maybe, and we'll bring the kids. No, maybe the idea is go hang out with Habib and Maha because you don't know them. And it's going to train your kids to play with their kids, and it's going to teach them a new culture, and you're going to learn. What if we did that? Like, I think that's something that we have to focus on. Clemency said training children for war, which is what they want. They don't want kids growing up with love and collectivism. They need them. It's not that they're bad, but they need kids growing up okay with murder and colonization because that's what everybody's done. Going back to King Namo, which is why I'm in Egypt. You know, it's important that we do look back and we do understand history and that the colonizers didn't come from Europe. They came from Africa. Gosh, did he say that out loud? Oh my goodness. You mean the colonization started from the South? Yeah, it did. That's a scary thing. But everybody started from the South. Everybody's African. Don't care who you are. Would you think? We all came from the same sub-Saharan deserts. Where the aliens put us and the genetic engineers got us started. Let me see. Building a clubhouse in the woods was more fun than video games. That's right. Back then, Brother Mark, you know, you only stayed inside if you were punished. If you were outside, you were building a fort, you were doing something, you were meeting kids. There's a patent for mind manipulation through light flash intervals on the screen. Becomes very addictive. Oh, Lord, Christine, why did you tell me that? That is horrible. Oh, that's just scary. It makes too much sense. It does. Because that was one of my theories. I think that digitally they do play these games with us, that they actually digitally are programming us through. And now you're going to tell me there's a patent? I ain't never watching TV again. Christine, why you ruin my day? Mental slavery brought upon ourselves. Yes, it's all mental slavery brought upon by ourselves. And we want to keep cherishing this profit-based society. We keep pushing forward with it. And these evils are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's not because the game maker is evil, but the game maker wants a big house. And we're not printing houses. And the only way he can get a house instead of a 3D printer that can print a mansion for everybody and cost almost nothing out of hemp, he's got to make a video game that's popular in the time. We are definitely victims of our success. We are victims of a profit-based system that we need to walk away from. Constant stress will disconnect the frontal lobe. Thank you, Jeannie. And that's what I was leaning towards. Maybe that is the case. Maybe that we are flipping the warrior gene on in these kids. Maybe that, not only is it scarcity that these kids in these impoverished environments that are flipping their warrior genes, but we're also giving them that violence through movies and the video games, because I don't know, we don't have shows like we had back in the 80s, and we don't have video games that are, but the funny thing though is kids don't buy video games without us. Kids don't buy video games without us. We are the ones, and I say we as a collective, not me. We're the ones who buy the Grand Theft Autos. We're the ones who cherish the violent video games. We're the ones who buy them. If our buying power is voting like we talk about, and people were understood how the subconscious gets programmed the same way they do the military and boot camps and police training through video games and simulators, then maybe we shouldn't be giving our kids simulation for violence. That's a parent decision. Let me see. The little movies that play one after another on Facebook do the same thing. Ooh, yes, they do, Mary. And so do commercials. And training you to ask your doctor, 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 ask your doctor. It's okay. It's normal side effect. Diarrhea, blooding of the anus, this, that, and the other, cancer, death. And you don't even hear that in the pharmaceutical commercial. It's just normal. We get trained like, oh, that's just normal. But I'm still going to take the drug because it's going to make my headache go away instead of drinking a glass of water. Shock doctrine. Look it up if you haven't watched it, regarding American News and Policy with Naomi Klein. I'm vaguely familiar with it. I saw a disturbing recruitment video geared toward youth for the military. It had the video game theme. Yes, Sandra, because it's fun, right? Killing people is fun. Driving tanks and drones and dropping bombs and doing this thing is fun. They're not really human beings. We're just, because they're training the kids. They're not, I don't think they're really ready with the AI robots to fly the drones and do all the devastation. They still want people involved. And so they need kids to fly these things, but they need kids who become young adults who are okay with pressing a button and people disappearing and getting points for it. And once they have kids that are those little video game psychopaths, they have militaries that can dominate the world, and no one will, ask any questions about what they're doing. It's, they don't get points and beep, 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 beep. They don't get that. They get money in their bank account. Like, oh yeah, they get bonuses for how many buildings they blow up, how many convoys they shut down, how many enemies they kill. And it's just a video game. And I can see a direct walk of kids from video games into military, kids, video games, points and street credit into adults paying mortgages, which is what we are. Which is why I don't say much about the military and the police and their job. They're doing the job that we all want, not in voice, but in action and in voting and how we spend our money and how we support and what political parties we support. They want all of this. This is not a one-sided thing. It's like they talk about the left and the right all over the world. Say, oh, well, they were talking about France and they were saying that the president is leaning towards the right and the party of the rich. And in America, they try to convince you that the right is the party of the rich, the Republicans. It's not true. None of it's true. They're both party, and the left is the party for the poor. Look out for the poor people. No, it's not true. None of that's true. They're both parties for the elite. And we work for the elite. And we buy everything the elite has. We watch their television programs, we cheer it, we like it, and we share it on Facebook. And we build up the society why we in voice critique these things, but we support these things. We have the jobs that make the police do what the police do, which, by the way, did y'all know Sherry Hunkela, she's in prison. She marched down to, what was it, DC, Homeland Security, went to go see the HUD guy, what's his name, Benny Carson, Brother Ben didn't want to see her, and they arrested her. Homeland Security had, last time I checked yesterday. Just to go down there with a bunch of people who are being evicted to say, don't evict us, please. Petitioning their government. And the government says, we don't have time to meet with you, because HUD is not for poor people. The federal government is not for poor people. The federal government's place is just to keep you divided up so that whoever owns them can continue to run this world. That's what that's about. Yeah, Georgia. Georgia hates the bloody butt cheeks. Well, you know what? Listen, apparently people like to dance and sing, and I guess whatever they get from the drugs that they take more than the side effects, which is why everybody's sick, which is why I'm not for-profit health care. I'm against all of it. I have no interest in any of it because it all works together. All those drugs that you buy, they support the military-industrial complex. They support the disease, the diseases that we have. They support the chemical industry. They all work together. Supports the prison system. All of this stuff works together. The only way out of it is we all back out and we go back to being strong lone wolves. We look back to the future, or not back to the future, back to the past, and figure out what the future looks like if we keep walking this way, if we keep throwing out the wisdom of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and those who came before them and those things that were passed down for thousands of years and embrace the modern ignorance of today. It all started with playing cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers. The more I remember the games I played, the more I realized that I was trained to be okay with criminal activity. Even if you were the hero, you're allowing criminals to exist to create your own legacy. May as well be promoting criminal action to be able to keep the gaming going. Yes, Emerson, you're right. Absolutely, totally agree. We had cowboys and Indians. So cowboys and Indians, of course, everybody wanted to be the cowboys. Nobody wanted to be the Indians because the Indians were the bad guys. They were the ones that, they were always trying to scalp everybody. They were trying to steal horses. They're just horrible people. And we didn't question it until some of us got a little older, had an older brother or sister or somebody who came along and said, that's not true. None of that's true. But the indoctrination already set in that the cowboys were the good guys, and they weren't. They were the demons. Yeah, I don't think the Indians were a whole lot better. Again, I don't take sides in anything. Human beings are the problem. It doesn't matter who we are. If we're put in a position, we're going to do the wrong thing because our brains aren't developed to have power over each other yet. Sherry is a hero. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. She puts her action where her mouth is, and she stepped in the cut, and she stood up for those people, and they arrested her, and they put her in prison. To me, how does that work out? I think it had to do with the fact that they said she was trespassing. I don't think you can trespass on land that you pay for. Your tax dollars, and I think that's one thing that they told the group that went down there, that, oh, your tax dollars don't pay for this building. Yeah, they do. And the money you print. We pay for it in blood. Our kids go to fight in your wars. We pay for all of it. Whether it's directly tax dollars or what you printed or the petrodollar, we pay for it. And the poor people in the countries that we murder, they pay for it too. So the idea that you can go to a government building and not talk to your government, to me, that's like the police state at its finest. You can't have a police state that's that evolved. It makes no sense. It makes no logical sense to have a ruling elite that you can't even talk to. When your government doesn't have time to talk for you, then you can't have time to be with your government. Like but this gets back to the original thought. We're not evolved for governments too big. If your government doesn't have time for you, then your government's too big. They have too many people to oversee. You know, it's like a supervisor, right? At the lower levels of power structures. If the supervisor can't supervise that many people, then you get a new supervisor. I think that's the wrong decision. I think that you realize that that many people shouldn't be reporting up to those folks. I think we need to be in a day where we have chiefs. I don't think that we've evolved to have kings and lords because it's just controlling too many people, and they'll always do horrible, devastating things. Comes down to de-evaluation on all levels. It does, Mark, because it has to. It has to be de-evaluation on all levels, but you always got to have sellouts at every level that step on the people underneath them and be okay with stepping on the people underneath them on all levels, because life is a video game. I'm on this level, you're on that level, and it's okay. It's just a level. It's just a video game, right? I'm on a higher level. It's okay. I got a better job because I went to college. You didn't go to college. I went to college. It's okay that I step on your head. It's okay that you stand in line to want to talk to me. And if I don't want to talk to you, I can call Homeland Security and put you in prison. It's okay. That's how the world works. How the world's designed to work. I'm supposed to be in power. You're supposed to be under me. Because this is how I was trained. This is what Monopoly taught me. There are haves and have-nots. And it's okay with people having not. It's okay with poverty. It's okay with people starving around the world, as long as I'm at a higher level in the video game. Because I beat them. I won. I went to college and I got my degree and I got good grades and I beat you out of the job. So you have to be poor, you and your kids. It's normal. This is how the world works. It's how the world should work and keep working, right? It's how we want to raise our kids. Reading apps in schools have levels that cause kids stress and competition. I think competition is bad, Brenda, everywhere. I don't believe in competition. I think that we don't have to compete with each other. We have a world to compete against us. Damn it, we got a whole space full of aliens we're going to have to compete with. We don't need artificial competition. We don't need artificial scarcity. We don't need planned obsolescence. We don't need artificial war. We don't need artificial conflicts. We have microbiology that are trying to kill us. We have avian flu that wants to kill us. We got asteroids on the way. We got flood levels rising. We got climates that are changing. We don't need any more competition to drive humanity. If humanity's not smart enough to realize that we are going to die if we don't pull together, then we should die. Totally. We got to invent competition to get kids to do positive things and to invent things. We don't deserve this planet or anything on it. We should die. We should become extinct. We have to raise our kids to be smarter than we are. We have to raise our kids to be upgrades of who we are, not dumber versions or clones of our own ignorance. It's not a thing of judgment because I'm ignorant too, which is why I raise my kids to question me and question them. That is extensive what you're allowed to question dad to. But you want your kids to be upgrades from a healthy perspective, from a strength perspective, from a questioning indoctrination perspective, in every way. You don't want to raise your kids to be you. You're dumb. You are. I think we have to accept that. We're stupid. Not in terms of everything, but we're perfectly evolved for how we were raised, the indoctrination we were given, the environment our brain had at that time, 1970s. They got to live in 2020s, 2030s, 2040s. We're dumb in 2040 and 50. We need to raise evolved creatures, not creatures that are dumb clones from the 70s. That are still locked in 70s mindsets, 80s, 90s, whenever you were born. That's what I'm thinking today. Gotta get going. Awesome talking to you guys this morning. pretty bad.